Okay, after the giant clam attack, I'm all in. I've got to read chapter 6. Also, I really like the idea that there's just this galleon full of money with a chest full of money that they can just dive in and take at will. I mean, it's a little tricky to get the money out, but that's an intriguing idea. All right, chapter 6. It's probably going to be the wedding. Ooh, there's going to be intrigue. The weather was fine, and the wedding guests came from all directions. They came in carretas drawn by oxen, on horseback with dogs at their heels, young and old, dressed in silver and brocades. The women smelled of perfume, and the men's hair shone with bear grease. By noon, the hitching rack outside the big gate was full, and we built another. Carts fanned out across the mesa. We had room in the house for 32, about a fourth of the guests. The others raised colored tents around the house. In all, Doña Dolores had invited 120. All came, and many besides who were not invited. Iris wore a dress of fine white muslin with knots of pink flowers around the hem. Her skin was pale because she never went out without a parasol when the sun was shining. She also wore a lot of white powder, which she had bought from a gringo trading ship. In her pale skin and white powder and pink and white dress, she looked like a delicious dessert, like one of the sugary buñuelos or bonelos that Anita the cook made. Iris said to me, "I hope you aren't put out because I am marrying first. He is a fine and wonderful man." "He is, and he is also the best horseman in the countryside," I said, thinking about a white gelding he owned, which I would like to trade a brood mare for when the wedding was over and he was my brother-in-law, thinking too how fortunate it was that I would not need to wait on him as his obedient wife. "No, Iris, I am only envious of you." "I am glad you do not mind," said Iris, looking at her hands. "It will be good to be mistress in my own household." She raised her eyes to the spot where Doña Dolores sat welcoming the guests, and it struck me stronger than ever how difficult it must have been for her, being as she was the daughter of my father's unlucky second wife. Don Roberto wore his hair in the Furioso style, pushed up in front and long on the sides. His jacket was made of black velvet, tricked out with silver braid and large silver buttons. His trousers were split up the sides, and when he walked, you could see flashes of red. I crossed myself. I thanked the Virgin Mary that it was Iris, and not I, Don Roberto was marrying. Our chapel would hold only half of those who wanted to see the wedding, so it was held outside by the corral. Father Barones came from Santa Isabel to read the service. He was an old man and spoke in a quavering voice that no one could hear. "Just as well," my grandmother hissed in my ear. "It is likely the wrong passage that he is reading from the Bible. When you are married, I will send to San Gabriel for Father Justo." The musicians played many tunes during the wedding. There were 5 men, and they played 3 guitars and 2 violas. When the wedding was over and one of the barrels of aguardiente was empty, everyone hurried down to the pits where the cooks had uncovered the slabs of meat and placed them upon trestles. My grandmother poured herself a handful of salt and dipped her meat into it. She always seemed to like salt better than the beef. I think she ate the meat to enjoy the salt. Father Barones took some of the beans, some tortillas, and a scoop of chile, and a slice of the beef. Then with his knife he stirred all the food together round and round before he spooned it up. "He is very religious," my grandmother said. "He thinks it is a sin to eat good food, so he makes it look like something else." I heaped my platter and ate where I couldn't watch Father Barones. The beef was tender and sweet on the tongue. In the afternoon, after a long siesta, everyone gathered on the mesa for horse racing and sports. I rode to the mesa on my gelding, Sixto, following my grandmother in her silk-lined carreta. Tiburon was too much for me to manage. My swollen hands still could not get grip of the reins. I could manage the gelding with spurs alone, but not the stallion, who required a heavy Spanish bit as well. My grandmother said, "The way you are dressed, you must plan to ride in the races." I had on a deerskin shirt dyed blue, and deerskin trousers and blue stitched boots. I wanted to wear a pretty dress with ruffles, which Doña Dolores had bought me from a Yankee trading ship, but my father said I looked better in trousers than I did in a dress. I didn't like this remark very much. Doña Dolores gave up, saying, "The harm is already done. By now, everyone knows Carlota de Zuberan. A little more cannot hurt." She dabbled at her eyes and gave a little sniff. I did promise her that I would not go in the rooster race, which made her feel better, but not much. I failed to tell her that I didn't like the race anyway. This was a race between 4 men. 6 roosters were buried in the ground up to their necks, just their heads showing. Then the men set off at a gallop. The winner was the one who could reach the finish line first, with the most chicken heads in his hand. That is horrid. Whew. Sometimes there was a second race, if it was a tie, even a third. It took a great deal of skill to reach down when the horse was at a gallop, and at the right instant snatch off the rooster's head. That is just very cringy. My father was famous, I had heard, as a rooster racer when he was in his youth. I didn't like the race and never tried it, but it was very popular. I took part in only one of the events. This one was for speed and endurance. The course started from the hitching rack. It ran for a league across the mesa, and through a grassy marsh and up a rise, and across a deep ditch, and through some heavy chaparral, and then back in a last straight run for the hitching rack. I had an advantage because I knew the country, having traveled it many times. I was willing to give the rest of the riders a head start, but all of them, including the bridegroom, scoffed at the idea. "I should give you a head start," Don Roberto said, casting a look at me, I am sure comparing me in my leather clothes with his beautiful white and pink bride. And I could hear him congratulating himself that it was a piece of good fortune that he had not married me. "Perhaps 100 varas halfway across the mesa," he went on. "I will advise the others." "Don't bother, brother-in-law," I said. "I'll race you even, or not at all." This did not please Don Roberto, nor my father, who had bet heavily on the race and wanted any advantage for me that he could get. He said nothing, however, because he didn't want the men to feel that they were racing someone who needed a head start. We will stop right there. Now we have to see who won the race. So I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to have to read chapter 7.